same thing.
I think I put it wrongly. It's they are 1:1. When you bring the money that you exchange in Hong Kong into China, is 1:1. But when you actually want to buy and sell, it's different. Like for example,
so when you trade,
which is very interesting. When I go to Hong Kong, when I want to go to China, I buy the renminbi, right, the yuan, right? It's so cheap. It's way lower. It's way cheaper, to buy the renminbi. Yeah, it's so cheap. It's cheaper than what you search on Google. It's like, wow, I got getting a good deal. But the thing is, that's the whole point of China. They want the foreign exchange. They want the foreign money. But the thing is, when you want to exchange backwards, it's different. It's so much difficult. I believe that the one that is traded, the CNH, is controlled very tightly. How much money is there? Because there is a limited number.
It's just a trading instrument. You cannot confuse. You cannot confuse it with the currency you use on a day-to-day basis. It's just a trading instrument.
Same with the euro. How much money you can bring out of China is controlled.
The CNH is not controlled. CNH is freely
how much money you
CNY is controlled because it's traded inside China.
CNH currency valuation is based on how much money is circulated outside of China, right? So how much
CNH equals to CNY equals to renminbi. 1:1.
Correct. But then they will control the current how much money that flows out of China, because if not, then you have a capital flight.
No. The CNH is just a trading instrument. It's just like those Google ETFs.
No,
they are it's just a trading instrument created for you to trade the currency. It's not the currency. You can just buy the gold ETF. Doesn't mean even if no gold, all the gold disappear in the world, you can still buy the gold ETF. You don't need gold to have a gold ETF.
So what I'm trying to say is the value of China dollars, the value of the Chinese currency outside is controlled in the sense that the amount of Chinese currency that can go out of China is controlled. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's nothing to do with that.
100% to do with that.
Because the value of CNH is tied to CNY. So all the traders outside China who get to trade the CNH will look at the value of CNY, and then they will arbitrage themselves because they know that China will defend the currency, because China has a shit ton of money. So it's impossible for them to break the pact of the 1 CNH equals to 1 CNY equals to 1 renminbi. So there's confidence built in the sense that China has so much financial power. So when the CNY to USD is internally traded, say 1:5, and the CNH to USD is 1:4.9, it will move from 4.9 to 5, because people know they will be. So the arbitrage traders make money that way by pushing the CNH back towards CNY. It's not a perfect system, as with all the currencies.
We are not talking on the same track, which is why we are not agreeing, because what you say I agree, because it's just how FX works. And what I'm saying that in terms of in the geopolitics, in a political or the country sense, there is two different currencies where they have to control. One is actually the foreign exchange, which there is limited. One is the money that they can print themselves, unlimited, and which is foreign exchange is limited, right? Your foreign exchange reserve is limited.
No, they can't print CNY unlimited because it causes hyperinflation.
This is why
the Aussie dollar,
which is why
limited, Australia is going to go hyperinflation.
Which is why China have a capital flight control. They don't allow you to transfer any amount of money that you want. That's my point.
Yeah.
Correct? That is why, because there is a separate currency. Because if you allow
it's not because separate currency. They just want
the
money
moment
to flow out of the country.
Correct. The moment you allow the money to flow out, you realize that there is actually not enough foreign currency within China to actually do this exchange, and then you will see the Chinese yuan hyperinflate because they overprinted the money within China. This is what I'm trying to say. The reason why you even have capital control is because that allows you to print more money than you actually can sustain.
There are two separate things
in a trading situation.
There are two separate things. One is you are trying to maintain store value of stuff within China, which is keeping the currency within China. The other thing is trying to you're talking about two different things. One is if you print too much money in any local currency other than
correct, you hyperinflate, right?
We have hyperinflation, right? So the statement that China can print its banana money any amount once is just flat out false. That's not true. Okay. Second, China has currency controls because it is trying to prevent capital flight. So capital flight is something that happened to Lebanon. So basically what happened there was a bunch of bankers took all the money of all their deposits. They just sent it overseas. And
all right. What kind of money? What money is that?
They converted it to US dollars. They sent it overseas, right?
So there's no more foreign dollar. There's no more USD in the country, right?
Yes. So that's what China is trying to prevent.
Well,
it's got nothing to do with them being able to print a lot of money.
Exactly, because the value, because there is a real value. There's a real currency, and then when the real currency is entirely taken out of the country dies, because the country doesn't really produce enough real value, or not enough to sustain. When you print too much money, that's why you hyperinflate. That's what happened to Lebanon. Because you took out the US dollar out, you took out the foreign currency out. That's what I'm trying to say. You don't take out the Lebanon money out. You don't take out the Chinese yuan out. You're taking out US dollar out. This is what I'm trying to say. The moment you take out all the foreign exchange out,
wait. They don't prevent you from taking any US dollars out. They prevent you from taking Chinese yuan out. So your argument is
yes,
kind of
correct. Because everything is traded.
You can take US dollar into China and then take US dollars out, no problem. But if you want to take Chinese yuan out, you have to go to the bank.
Correct.
Make an application.
That's why you cannot convert it to US dollar, because there's a control.
You can.
Why they control? Yeah, you can. Limited. There's a limit how much you can bring out. I have so many people do business. I talk to so many people who do business in China. They find it so hard to take money out of China.
Yes, because you can't. Okay, again, if you are in China, you have a Chinese trading account, and then you go onto your trading account and you buy US dollars. You can't take that US dollars and send them anywhere. To use that US dollars, you need to convert it back to Chinese yuan, put it into your Chinese account, right?
Correct.
So that Chinese yuan, you cannot take it out of the country.
That's right. You can't even change it to US dollars
in the country. You can take it out. There is no currency restriction on our
that's physical money. I'm talking about you cannot exchange it into a US dollar and bring out, let's say, 100,000 US dollar out. Very hard.
No, it's impossible. That if you are in US and you buy euros using a trading account, it's also impossible for you to take that euro out of the country. You need to convert that euro back into USD, transfer it back into your bank account, go to a currency trader, convert that into euros, and then you can take the euros out of the country.
Okay.
What you're talking about is
we're definitely talking not on the same track. So let's move on.
Okay, I would like to ask a question that may still be relevant to the topic and still be on the double currency thing that you guys are not getting an agreement on, and that is because it's a matter of capital control and
because
protection.
why it means something, because right, how China going to operate, how China operates its currency will be similar to how BRICS might have to control its currency if it's a closed system. That means it's not a free floater currency, because if you allow free floating, means anyone can take wealth out of the country, out of the territory. If it's protected, the wealth stay within the country. It's very hard to take the money out. So there is the difference there, and the importance.
Isn't it true that India and China are nearly at conflict? Like this is what I find the BRICS thing very spurious, because like these are not stable countries. Well,
I wanted to ask you.
The idea that those countries like the BRICS could organize a system where they can all like adhere to a bunch of.
I heard Koping say a very good question. He asked why not more countries do it like China, right? Is that what you asked?
Yes, precisely.
Because there is a downside to this, because people don't want to invest in your country when you close the system like this. Imagine, why would you want to do business in Singapore if whatever money you earn in Singapore you cannot bring out? That is the problem. But China always use the idea of we have a 1 billion people market, and it's true, and it's very easy to make money in China. You can make a lot of money, but the problem is you cannot bring it out. That is the problem with China. The same thing in Vietnam as well. My client friends who do business in Vietnam, he said he cannot get his money out. It's the same system. It's not just China is doing this. Many countries doing this because it helps to protect their country from getting attacked financially.
From getting stripped, from getting colonized and stripped.
Yeah, or you can be colonized,
or protecting your own assets,
or simply do a financial attack and then they just take all the wealth out, like what happened in Lebanon.
What happened in Lebanon?
Yeah. So Singapore, we have a totally open floated currency. And how we protect ourselves is that we invest everywhere around the world, and we be friends with everyone around the world. Which is why, even though we are the so-called Israel of Southeast Asia, Israel cannot do what we do because Israel is enemy with so many people. So most countries are actually very protected. They cannot have a free-floating currency. They will die very easily. China just take it a little bit more extreme because the risk of capital flight will destroy the country. Nobody know how much money they printed. Even though Drew can say it is, but I don't trust the data. It doesn't matter what China say. No, I don't trust them. But the thing is, it is a good policy because how would you know? No, if I can print money and I have no need to be accountable for it, and it cannot hyperinflate because there's no capital flight risk, and I can tax the people that get back the money.
Okay, I think we've beaten this horse until it's dead and done. Yeah, I want to answer Toby's. I want to answer Toby's question with an anecdote. You mentioned that India and China seem to be at loggerheads, and you find it quite weird that they are in this pseudo alliance of sorts in the BRICS. So I was watching this interview with this Chinese guy who was giving a speech in the US. Apparently he's this businessman or professor that meets Putin once a year in Valdai, and then he was asking Putin, is China and Russia's relations, how stable or how rocky is it? And then so he said that when Putin came to power, China and Russia had 7,000 border disputes, and Putin corrected him. Putin said, no, it's 8,000. And today, China and Russia have a grand total of 7.5 border disputes. You see, so all these countries, India is the same as China. They are all sovereign countries in the sense that they are all vying for their self-interest, but they also are quite happy to work with their neighboring countries to try to. I mean, they all want their border recognized, but if they can work bilaterally to resolve the problems in a diplomatic way, it doesn't have to come to violence. So this idea of an alliance is a very Western idea. These guys are not allies. China, Russia, India. Yeah. Okay, I don't know about India, but China and Russia not allies. They have their own self-interest, and right now their self-interest aligned. So they're going to use each other to achieve what they need. Same thing with China and India. I mean, the famous thing is China and India have this border dispute in Kashmir, right? But the politicians know they don't want these to blow up, but they also don't want to give in and say, I'm going to give away this land. So both sides ban their guys from using guns. So you see this comical scenario where they're using sticks to fight each other in 2023, right? Because the worst thing that can happen is one guy gets a concussion, and then there's a big brouhaha.
I think the Ukrainians and Russians can learn a lot from them.
It looks like a football match, it's organized. Everybody goes out there and they have a big group boxing match. It's like
I want to share to the viewers
give up on their claim, but it doesn't escalate too much.
So the viewers, right, who are not from Asia, right, probably don't understand. In Asia culture, right, Asian country in general, we don't have this idea of messing around with countries overseas usually, unless they're just next to us. Maybe because they are too weak, and then we can bully them. Otherwise, it's all very inward looking, and we just want to know. Okay, you do your own thing, I do my own thing. You don't mess with my internal politics. I don't mess with your internal affairs. That's how all Asian countries operate. Which is why like even for Singapore as a very freedom democratic country, we actually opposed the invasion of Cambodia by Vietnam, even though Khmer Rouge is actually massacring millions of people. And to this day, Singapore government still maintain that Vietnam is wrong for invading Cambodia, despite they actually saved millions of people from potential death. And Vietnam is very pissed off with it because they feel that they did the right thing. And of course, this is a very weird thing. the West.
Yeah, Drew was explaining that to me about because I knew that China had went to war with Vietnam, but I never understood it. And it was actually Drew who explained to me that China had an agreement with Cambodia, so they had to go to war. They weren't trying to conquer Vietnam. They could have stayed if they'd want. All they were doing was adhering to the agreement, and then they went home again.
Because
I don't know. That was very interesting to me because that makes sense. But I would not have guessed that. You know.
Yeah, there was a communist split between the Soviet Union and China. So they have their own, both have their own version of communism. And then Cambodia under Pol Pot was subscribing to the China style. So-called, simply they are just making use of China. And then Vietnam is actually backed by Soviet. Vietnam is actually aligned to Soviet Union because they are afraid of China. So it's just natural.
So that was almost a proxy war between China.
Yes, it's a proxy war between communist countries. So it's actually
it wasn't really a war. No, it wasn't really a war. When China went in, Vietnam's army was in Cambodia, so they didn't really fight anybody. It was all militia.
No, it's wrong. So they fought. So thousands of people died.
Thousands of people died, but it wasn't an army clash. There wasn't a war.
It's not a full-fledged war. It's
like a partisan
war.
But like the regular people killed off a few thousand Chinese, and then a few thousand regular people.
So it was like a Ukrainian army going into Donbass. That's basically the equivalent. China went to Vietnam. It would be like when the Ukraine army went into Donbass. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. It's like if Russia had not launched the northern and southern offensive, they only go into Donbass and try to liberate Donbass a little bit. Something like this. It's a small war. It's not a major war. It's not like we declare war kind of war. It's like a special military operation by China to try to stop Vietnam from continue their incursion into Cambodia, which kind of failed. But then so both states they succeeded, so it doesn't matter. So you will never get to the conclusion.
No, the funny thing is their stated war aims at the start of that was to, number one, force Vietnam to withdraw from Cambodia, which failed.
Did not happen.
And the number two was to punish Vietnam, which they did.
Works.
So what happened was they invaded all the way to Hanoi, declared that the gates of Hanoi open, we have won, and then they burnt everything on the way out.
And they conquered Paracel Islands around.
So they just burnt everything. So they caused a famine in Vietnam. It destroyed their entire economy. So for decades they had to rebuild. That's why you talk to a lot of Vietnamese.
Not sure if it's that major I'm not sure if that's
yeah. It's said that Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam was a very strong. Its economy was very strong before that.
Okay, go back to dollarization.
For the viewers' information, I'm currently in Vietnam. So if viewers didn't know, I'm currently in Vietnam. So yeah, I can attest to that. Hanoi, people hate China. In Hanoi, everybody hates China.
I've done some business in Vietnam. I love Vietnam, man. It's a great country.
It's beautiful.
I was really surprised how they didn't like the Chinese at all. Like you
don't make it It's quite recent. It was 1978. There are people that still remember the event. They're still alive.
I'm in Saigon, in Ho Chi Minh City. Here, the people are more neutral, but in Hanoi, they hate China.
All countries around China don't like China. No, all neighboring countries around China don't like China. It's just like all neighboring countries around Russia don't really like Russia. Because you're sitting beside a massive giant. So you don't really have control over your own destiny, kind of thing. So it's like everything you have to depend. You have to look up to this giant, and then you have to see whether what's good. No,
North Korea is afraid of China. North Korea would exist if not for China.
Belarus, Tajikistan.
Yeah, they have their friends. You wouldn't say
I think Belarus also. I think it came a long way. I don't think they in the beginning. I think it only these few years seems to
No, because the West tried to coup the Belarusian leader. That's why he got so pissed and went with Russia. If they didn't do that, he wouldn't be so.
It's only recent years kind of thing.
Belarusian economy is actually very interesting too, because everything they produce, Russia just buys. Without Russia, Belarusian economy is nothing.
Sorry, I don't get it. What do you mean by nothing? Sorry.
Without
Russia, Belarus.
Without Russia,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I think is that the same for Baltics? Is that the same for Baltics?
Okay. Wait,
so
we're horribly off topic.
Well, let's go back to de-dollarisation.
How am I going to edit this, man?
How do you
just put it out there? This is like open mic.
I guess you're gonna chop, and just
How do you think de-dollarization?
I find it very interesting actually to listen to two guys talk about China who actually know about China. It's a rare thing.
It's always
and we have very different views
rare.
of China. Like we have totally different views, like opposite.
China is its own enemy when it comes to public relations. They don't care about anybody else, so they don't bother telling other people.
I just want to add. No, just now I wanted to say, for those viewers that do not know, China in Chinese is called 中国. 中国 simply means the middle country or the middle kingdom. So that entirely symbolize how China look at China itself. We are the civilized people. Or if I'm Chinese, China Chinese. I'm the civilized people. You guys are all barbarians, and that is the way how China look at the world for the past 5,000 years.
Not anymore. It's not really.
Not much.
Everybody is a barbarian. They just don't think. It's like they
just don't think.
They just don't think about other people.
The West thinks that way.
They don't hate Western people.
Europe thinks that
way. They
don't
think about Western people. They don't hate anybody else. They don't like anybody else. They just you don't even factor into their conception.
Yeah, for large parts of the history, because large part of history they are surrounded by tribes and the Mongols and all. So the worldview is always we are the civilized one. We are the one with cities, with walls, with farming, and then you guys are all barbarians. Riding your horse.
Yeah, they kept invaded by the steppe people, the Xiongnu and the Mongols and whatnot.
Yeah, like the Vietnamese all live in the jungle. Kind of what kind of civilization is that?
So trying to get this again to de-dollarisation, I have a potentially stupid question in this regard, but that's why I'm here for. And I actually have two questions, but I'm going to stick with one first, and that's particularly to digital currency, and I mean the nominal form of digital currency, just credit card and whatever. Now, in this regard, I came across an article here earlier today where Nigeria was trying to implement its own domestic card scheme that was kind of meant to replace or at the very least get the Visa and MasterCard to not be so dominant. And that made me think, though, then in the terms of this topic of de-dollarisation, right? So what would happen to this credit card duopoly of Visa and MasterCard? Would they be affected in any way by de-dollarisation? Like, would we... Yeah?
Well, they'd lose market share. They'd lose market share to the new. Yeah.
So there's no way they could, for example, have because I'm a little bit unsure how credit cards work, but I want to know the really, really basics. But is there an inhibition to because when I use my credit card, for example, abroad, I'm always using my Norwegian crowns, and whether it goes through the US or whatever, the exchanges and so forth, that's one thing. But it seems to be like a form of ubiquity when it comes to these cards, which I suspect has a lot to do with the dollar. And so, but if we get a BRICS currency, wouldn't the credit card companies, by their own arbitration, simply say that, okay, yeah, you can use your card with both the dollars and the local currency and the BRICS currency, all depending on where they do accept it. But the thing the credit card companies have to do then is make an agreement that enables that, right?
Yeah. Well, you're presuming that the relations are good. But if there's sanctions between the blocks, if it becomes like the Cold War, and you've got the communist bloc and the Western bloc, right? So that's the danger of deglobalization, is that you actually get this balkanization of the world. But alternatively, if everybody gets along and you get this de-dollarization and everybody's happy.
So my personal view is
so complicated. Right now, I have a Visa card in my wallet, and it's in Sing dollars. You can get a Visa card in the new BRICS currency. It's not so complicated. Visa and MasterCard, they're just service providers that provide this service that the banks buy into, and then they get their money every time you use the card.
In the end, they're just business as well. They want to make they need to make money.
So for them, nothing happens financially unless unless something political occurs, like Toby referred to.
Yeah. So
unless there's something like that, then the credit card companies will. Okay.
Say the US government wants to sanction everybody that uses the BRICS currencies. And they say, okay, Visa, you cannot do this. Then Visa will get screwed because of its market share.
Well, but then Visa loses like billions of customers, not just millions, billions.
Because so then Visa might just flip and ignore the US and just deal with the
exactly.
They just create a new
set up a sister company, no? to set up.
Yeah, they just create a new brand called
company.
Chisa, Chisa and MasterCard.
Yeah, it just
well, I mean, I don't really see how they necessarily get affected, but they can simply just make up another entity and then have as many shareholders on each other.
Well, that's
BlackRock and Vanguard are a good example. BlackRock and Vanguard are the biggest investment firms, right? And they have the highest amount of holdings on each of the companies. So they're essentially one big company, right? So I kind of imagine something similar would then happen if let's say the US came with sanctions, then the Visa or MasterCard would simply set up a new sister company, make sure it owns the majority of the shares of that company and vice versa. And then, the same leadership essentially remains, right?
Okay.
Yeah, well, this is happening right now with Russian sanctions.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I need to go and do some domestic things. I need to deal with my baby. Yeah. So I'll be right back.
Okay. I
was just going to say that what Coping is saying is happening right now with Russia. I read last night an article where people are lamenting that the sanctions regime isn't working because it's not Russia that's getting around it. It's all the Western companies doing exactly what you were just saying, Coping. They don't want to lose their Russian market share. And I know why, too, because when I worked in Switzerland, I worked for a multinational owned by a Democrat in America, and I worked for a multinational owned by a Republican family. And both companies, one was selling industrial chemicals, the other one was selling jets. Both companies, the fastest growing market with the biggest margins was Russia. And there was a lot of anti-Russian rhetoric at that time too, and it used to really annoy everybody in the company who wanted to make money. So, yeah, for sure. This is one of the reasons sanctions don't work, because the reality is that companies are very skilled at getting around political objections to trade. And so I think you're right, Coping. I think that's what would happen.
Yeah, that's actually that reminds me. I think it relates to the topic we're talking about, the EFTs, because as far as I understood it, that was one of the ways they circumvented the sanctions. They basically had the oil in Russia traded as EFTs, and then it will go through several countries, and then eventually the Europeans would still be getting the oil and the gas, except that they wouldn't be trading directly to Russia. Like, it was a very circumvented, but they would do it themselves, like you said. And so the perhaps is an interesting question regarding de-dollarization, because we have already alluded to political responses to, for example, the BRICS and so forth, where sanctions might be involved. Like, what other, what methods can actually they use? Because it seems that de-dollarization it's definitely happening. It will be slow, perhaps, and all that. But what effective measures can actually the U.S. take to stop that?
Well, I've got something to say here, because I did some reading on this topic, because I wasn't really sure about de-dollarization, and I did a lot of reading, and I came to a conclusion in the end, and that is that if you have a look at Vanguard and BlackRock, right, those companies are made up of mutual funds. And I won't go into what mutual funds are because it's all peculiar American SEC law. But what I came to the conclusion was this. All of the legislation in the US that governs corporations is focused on getting business done. Like it says at the start of all the SEC laws, the purpose of this law is to facilitate the rights of the investor to make money. The purpose of this law is to facilitate economic growth, right? It's very different from other countries like Russia and China, where you have a lot of foreign control laws that are talking about the security of the country, right? America is strangely open, right? America is focused on business. This is why I don't think de-dollarization is going to happen, because if you're a budding capitalist from anywhere in the world, America is still the best country to go set up and work from there. And so, yeah, I think, so basically, if you want to get around sanctions, the place to do it is America. And that's why it's kind of hilarious that America is pushing these sanctions. And indeed, I think it's probably more European politicians pushing these sanctions. Sanctions are very un-American. And actually, I almost think that sanctions proclaimed by the American administration are just fluff This is just like politics. The bottom line is America is all about business. And if you want to get around sanctions, there's 1,000,001 ways from Sunday in America to do it, because that's what they're all about. So this is why. And when I realized this about the competing systems, I just thought, there's no way, man. As long as international capitalists from every different country are free to pick and choose, they're going to do business in America. Like Rupert Murdoch, the magnate from Australia, as soon as he could get out of Australia and England, go to America, he did. You know, there's a reason American culture is so popular with capitalists.
To prove your point, I can give an example. So Coca-Cola, American company, it is still there in Russia, just under a different name. But companies like Volkswagen, European companies, they're back. They left Russia, and Russia had to fix that issue. Same goes for McDonald's, big company. It's still like they're still running under a different name. That's it. It's they just changed the name, but the companies are still there in Russia.
And I think that the way how the Ukraine war, you see how all the different countries that so-called neutral, like India and Indonesia, they don't really follow the West in terms of the sanctions and everything, which also shows that BRICS with their new currency is unlikely to be adversarial. Is unlikely to be go with the way how Libya wanted to do go with the African dinar, gold dinar kind of thing, where we're going to enforce trade only purely by gold kind of thing. So it's not going to be like, the BRICS country will decide, okay, we only trade in this new BRICS currency. I don't think this will happen, because there is just way too much interest, just like what Toby said, way too much interest all across the world. Like my country have investment all around the world. I'm sure every single country is the same. So the breakdown of the global trade system don't make sense, but they do need a new currency. Don't say reserve currency, just a global trading currency that will help them to, at least they can feel they can don't put all their eggs in one basket, because you don't know what the Americans are going to do. When are they going to quantitative easing again, print money without people knowing? No, because they can just legislate and just print. So at least with a different currency, they can actually kind of feel safer. They will still trade with US dollars with countries that prefers US dollar. I'm quite sure that will be the case. So at least that will actually also force United States to reform their financial system and monetary system, so that they can be more competitive with this new up and coming BRICS currency. I'm quite sure it will not be a quick collapse, but I'm quite sure US dollars will be heavily affected for sure, because suddenly half the world will decide to trade in the BRICS currency. I'm quite sure that the interest rate might actually have to increase even furthermore to prevent the hyperinflation and everything.
But Wyatt, when you say half the world, like what I'm hearing there is half the governments of the world. Well, no. Let's just say half the governments of the world make it a political policy to dump the dollar. So what happens when 90% of the capital in those half the world's countries flees those countries and moves to Singapore? Because this has happened. How many companies have left Hong Kong to go to Singapore? A lot. A lot. Since the Chinese took over. So this is the thing. Half the countries in the world might agree politically to de-dollarize and cause massive capital flight, right? And destroy themselves and really improve Singapore's economy, for example. So this is why I think when we talk about half the countries in the world, it's like we're probably better off talking about what are the corporations going to do? Like what's capital going to do? Because it will flee to the best business environment. It always has, and it always will.
I would say that they will not so-called de-dollarize. They will diversify, in the sense. Like I
don't think China will do it. I don't think China wants to. Like China seems to me to be very
if China don't want
to, China is not going to do anything to hurt themselves. They're not. Chinese are not stupid. They're not financially stupid. So I don't see China doing political things for the sake of the club, the BRICS or whatever.
Which is why this ties back to how come India and China is working within the same bloc. Why Pakistan want to join BRICS despite India is inside. Why Saudi and Iran both at the same time want to join this bloc? Because it's not. I don't think this BRIC thing is a thing about killing the United States. It's really about creating an alternate system so that they can protect themselves from the United States. I think that is more like the case.
But
so
you will kill the United States in the process. That's the thing.
So as a European here, as a European who is constantly coping and is very worried that he will get emotionally damaged through de-dollarisation, it sounds to me a little bit like de-dollarisation will, at least not for a country like Norway, necessarily impact us so much or matter.
No, I don't think so.
You got the euros, right? So it's not.
Norway doesn't have the euro. We have our own currency, but we are trading a lot in euro.
Okay.
I think Norway is fine because you're not in the EU.
And you got heaps of oil.
But Norway's economy is also like this with the USA. So the Norway is the same as Canada. Their economy is very closely tied to US.
So what happens
if US economy suffers, Norway and Canadian both suffers.
Yeah. So that basically means that we will get hyperinflation. Like for example, with Norway and Canada, for example, when if hyperinflation hits the US, would Norway and Canada, because we are so tight, will we also be subjected to it despite having our own currencies?
I'm about
but you will lose a customer. You basically lose your main customer for your
which will cause hyperinflation here as well.
It won't cause hyperinflation in your own country. It's more recession because your businesses come back down.
So maybe some bank crash.
Small and very wealthy. Norway is very small, very wealthy, very well educated. I would say Norway will be able to turn on a dime, right, and it will be able to cope.
Yeah, trust me. Just sell it all to China instead.
Thank you.
I'm not sure about Norway, but Canada for sure, because 90% of our trade is with US. 90%.
Yeah. So you guys will stick to US dollars for sure. So you guys will stick to US dollars. So Norway will be like, with the blink of the eye, we are now friends with Russia. We are the best friend with Russia. BFF forever.
No. You see, when the US goes through hyperinflation, I don't think it's all doom and gloom for the US, because US is a self-sustaining economy. It can feed its own people. It can make its own things. What was happening?
Huge resources domestically, doesn't need to import.
So exactly. So it basically means it can't import stuff, but it also basically the population will have to learn how to live with stuff that it can make by itself. People
have to learn to work
again. Coal.
There will be
so the US will become like China in a way.
China, they need to rebuild
more like
those
Russia.
Industries within their own country. It will become like Russia in the 90s. As it started it has to kind of rebuild its base, industrial base again.
So if the de-dollarization happens and there some kind of a hyperinflation, I don't think it will be like the Venezuela or Zimbabwe kind of thing. I think there will be a significant increase in terms of the hyperinflation. In terms of inflation, there will be a severe recession for sure. And it might last for 10 years to 20 years because they need to readjust.
Are we predicting or describing? Because this seems to be happening right now. So we're seeing the inflation. We're seeing.
So what happened in that kind of situation will be United States going through what USSR went through, but they did not disintegrate. But it will be like what Russia have to go through. They have to rebuild everything from the ground up again. I think that will what happened to Russia picked up very quickly.
We're making a huge
because of this. I wouldn't put it.
Russia picked up very quickly, right? Russia revived itself in 10 years, I think. So United States is a lot more powerful. So I think
the US.
We're making lots of assumptions for this though.
Sorry,
we're making huge assumptions for this, like that. US won't do anything because right now the for example the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah, I know it doesn't really reduce inflation, but at the same time, what it does is it brings industries from Europe to US. So what they're basically doing, they're trying to industrialize during this inflation. So I do not think that hyperinflation will even occur. There may be some inflation, there may even be recession, but there will not be a hyperinflation. Even with the de-dollarization, like we talked about, de-dollarization is going to be a long process. It's not going to be like 2025 de-dollarization. No, it's going to be like over a period of maybe 5 decades. And those 5 decades gives you a chance to maybe deindustrialize and not prepare their industries for like
reindustrialize.
Reindustrialization. Same thing that US could do to prevent hyperinflation. That's my opinion, at least.
But I actually, there might be one factor here that might be relevant. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but I came across an article here not long ago where there were, I think it was BASF. It's the biggest energy company, I think, in Germany, which were making some serious plans of moving their basically whatever to like the same way companies and industries are moving to the United States. They were wanting to move to China. So, like, how likely is that, though, that because countries that are going to be facing a whole lot of recession because of the inflation will lower all of their overseas assets and many other things, I would assume. So these top upper echelons of the maybe not in Norway, but let's say Germany and France, while some of them may be going over to the United States, isn't it? It's a tug of war. So, if, for example, like Toby said, everyone goes to the United States because they have, in a sense, a corporate law that it guarantees investment, return on investment. So not guarantees it, but it makes it quite explicit. You have the right to start. Come here. We're going to make it for you.
It's focused on the rights of the investor to make money. It's not focused on the welfare of the American state. Right?
Naturally.
That is extremely attractive to capitalists from everywhere. Just as the contrary is unattractive. No capitalist wants to go in to some place where everyone's waving a flag and chanting "Hail to the King." Be a patriot.
But how could China then be let's say China took from a US playbook and then basically try to make it as investor friendly? It's a tug of war, right? So, like,
that's a really interesting question, and maybe Drew can answer that because I don't really know about China, but you guys do. This is an interesting question. Could China become like the new America? Is it possible for Chinese culture to focus on its financial and give up the communism and really sort of play to their financial strengths because they're good at business, right? So
it's not about
communism. Those are like three different topics in that one sentence. Okay,
so it's a good question though from coping,
Yes, but it's okay. Let's cover coping things. Query.
Answer the easiest one. There's no communism in China now. The easiest one.
There's no communism in China. That's okay.
Which hints at the alternative.
Okay, so what coping things is talking about is one of the biggest problems in China and a lot of Asian economies is when you invest in that, when you try to build create a company there, it has to have majority Chinese ownership. So like BASF isn't going to move everything to China. It's not going to do that because then it loses control of the company. So what likely will happen, as with a lot of Western companies, it will move its production facilities there and then have its corporate offices in Europe, for example, where it keeps all its ownership. So it opens up a local kind of subsidiary and partners with like an industrial company in China, and then together they build the thing, and then they'll make money together, and then the profits then half of it gets transferred out of China because half of it is foreign owned and the rest of it stays in China. So it's kind of win-win situation there. So they're not going to move the whole company there. They're just going to move the energy intensive operations.
But that is in part because the China has like a cap more or less how much they can be owning and so forth. So what if they change that then? What if they then decided we know the US will not be very attractive?
I'm coming to that. They have done this before. So for example, with Singapore, China created the Suzhou Industrial Park where Singaporean companies, fully owned Singaporean companies, were allowed to go set up there. So they create this special economic zone, they call, where fully foreign-owned foreign companies were allowed to go operate within those special economic zones. So they could create one of these things, for example, if they were given enough incentive to do so.
Like a special CBD in a sense. A special form of CBD.
Special industrial zone or something. So they have done
industrial zone, heavy industrial zone.
Yeah. So they have precedents for doing stuff like this.
Although I have to add the unknown thing that what was happened is that Singapore built the Suzhou Industrial Park. China built an exact copy of it just next door. So Singapore actually lost a lot of money. So
they screw us
that's the
over,
problem with China. So which is why, yes, China could become like US if they dare to open up everything, but they don't dare to, because which is why
that's the
which is where the
thing,
topic about the dual currency, the pre-money. So this is why I say what I said, because there is a cost to it, and they don't dare to do it because it's a gamble. When you do that, when you open, would capital flight happen? When capital flight happen, then your whole country collapse, CCP down.
But that has a lot to do with their current positioning, though.
Yeah, which is why they don't dare to.
So down the line, though,
it's a national. To them, it's a national security thing that they're never going to open up fully.